Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Tennyson E Stead, writer and director and founding member of Eight Sided Films. And today I'd like to talk about a topic requested by our house manager, Lee Holm, which is the question of rewrites. And presumably we're talking about rewrites when it comes to screenwriting, but I imagine the process really isn't very different, regardless of what you're writing. So when you're looking at the necessity for rewrites, the first thing you have to look at is what a rough draft actually is. And so, in general, the creative process relies very heavily on the habits we build over the course of a career. Most of the work that we do is, and I mean most specifically to mean upwards of 90% of the work that we do, is the habits that we've built over the course of a lifetime of doing the work. And about 5 to 10% is what are our intentions for this specific project. Most of the work we do is, the process itself and the stuff that we already know how to do that we don't have to think about, is what I'm trying to say. So, when you are undertaking a rough draft, you're taking all the habits that you have and all of your intentions for the project, and you're trying to get all of the things that you're hoping to accomplish on paper using those habits. And sometimes preparation is one of those habits. Structure definitely is informed by habit. All of that stuff comes into play. You get all the things you want to accomplish out on the page, and then you have basically a working copy of whatever the project is. And that working copy may be more or less useful depending on how good your habits are, really, and how prepared you are to write. But it's never going to be as specific as it can be. And the other thing to keep in mind is that our intentions structurally and our intentions in terms of, let's say we're telling a story, our intentions with regards to the story that we're telling are always going to be separate from, to some degree, our intentions with regards to who's going to be reading that story and who's going to be using the information on the page. Okay? Because ultimately our job is to communicate to someone else. Our job is to make sure that all this stuff that we want to accomplish is on paper so someone else can read it and understand it. So the first thing to worry about is to get it on paper. That's the first job. But then the second job is to make sure that the person who specifically has to understand it is capable of understanding it in the most simple and direct manner possible. And there's no way you're going to accomplish all of that in one draft. So what is the rewrite process? The rewrite process is working back through the writing process. For me, rewriting isn't about necessarily reading what I wrote. It's about rewriting what I wrote. So I'll sit down and I'll follow my train of thought back through the same process that I undertook when I first got everything down on the page, and I'll start finding more and more and more specific beats to pull out and hand to my actors. Because ultimately the basic stuff is already taken care of. It's already down there. So now I can start working through and finding all the little itty-bitty nuggets of gold, all the accidental stuff, and all the richness, and also make what's on the page stronger. Find those moments where my gut is telling me that I didn't make the strongest choice possible, which early on should be frequently that I'm having that impulse, and build a screenplay that I can hand to the actor so that they have all of the information easily accessible to them that they need to give a performance for the audience that's going to create a bond between them. So who am I really writing for when I write? I'm writing for my actors, and I'm writing for the audience. I'm writing to connect the two of those groups of people. That's what a screenplay does. Is it gives the actors actions, things to do that are going to connect them with the audience. So what I have to put on the page has to be not just a great movie, but it has to hand the actor the great movie. So I'm writing the text that is going to make the greatness and specificity of that movie as transparent as possible to the actor, so they don't have to do the work of understanding me. They can just do the work of performing what's on the page. Whittling that down is the rewrite process. And the question of, is there a point to rewrites never really comes up for me. There's always a point to rewrites. The question of when are you rewriting too much is maybe, for me, the question that I came to a little bit later in life. But the answer is actually pretty straightforward, which is when the person that you're writing for can get all of the things that they need to get off of the page with relative ease, when you can be reasonably confident that the person reading, regardless of how they're coming at the material, can get the point of what they need to get to, not just in the broad strokes, but have access to all the specificity and all of the little sort of tricks and doodads that might be in your imagination, not necessarily to the degree that you are telling them how to see what's going on, but just to the degree that you're offering them a way into the impulses that you're having so that they can mine the same patch of ground that you're mining. They can get in there and find the things that you're finding, or find different things, but find the stuff that you're into, that you've gotten your hands on. When the text is clear enough and specific enough to the reader and rich enough and detailed enough that they can start imagining the things that you're imagining and can take it from there without having to work too hard for it. Where you've given them that understanding and that place in your mind for them to access without any hitches and without any miscommunication and without any confusion about what your intentions are, then the rewrite process is done. After you hit that point, then you're just switching things around. You're just making different creative decisions. But if your text is solid, and if your plan for the project was good going in, then one creative decision is just as good as another. At the end of the day, it's how you execute it that really matters. So ultimately, once you get to that point where they can get into your headspace, or get into their own headspace, but have access to as much specific stuff around them as you have, and where it's clear, and where the information you're giving them is not confusing them and creating contradictions that they don't have the tools to reconcile. Contradictions that don't belong in the work. Contradictions like, oh, well, I thought this was a funny movie, but I'm saying this weird, who is this character? Those kinds of contradictions that sort of create a conflict, not in terms of the world is complicated and worth exploring and contradictions exist, but in the sense of the reader doesn't understand how they're supposed to be approaching the material because you've given them contrary information by accident. Once all of that is out of the way, once you've cleared it up to that point, then your rewriting process is done, I think. So, to sum up, the rough draft is your first attempt just to get all the structure and the stuff that you're trying to get on the page onto the page. Just get it on the page. And then the more you rewrite, first you're digging for the specificity and you're trying to find all the details in what's on the page, and you're going back through your writing process, to make sure that you haven't left any loose change on the ground, to go in and dig up all the stuff that you can possibly dig up. And then as you keep rewriting, you're weaning yourself off of sort of your experience with the material, and you're putting yourself into the experience of whoever the material is for. If it's a novel, it's for the reader. If it's a screenplay, it's for whoever. Maybe your screenplays are for readers at studios, or whoever you're writing for. But you wean yourself off of your experience with the material. Once your experience with the material is more or less complete, and you've got what you need out of it, or at least that you can access the details easily, you've built this world for yourself and you understand where you are, you start going into, who am I communicating to? How do I write this for them? How do I give them everything they need to be able to mill around in the same place that I'm milling around in right now? And once you've done that job, once you've made that transition from one kind of writing to the other, and where you're satisfied that the reader is going to be able to pick up what you've set down and go off into their own place with it without having your mistakes confusing them. Once you get to that point, then you're done. Then that's the rewriting process. I hope this has been helpful. If you enjoy these videos, give us a thumbs up. Boom, boom, boom. Please give us a subscribe. We have a lot of stuff coming over the next few months to the 8-Sided Films YouTube channel. There's going to be some big happenings with the character of David Alan Rifkin and the micro-budget film that we're going to be crowdfunding over the course of the next several months called Making the Gamp, which is about essentially an indie director who's everything that's wrong with Hollywood, bullying and abusing his way out of development hell and into production on a feature, and all the things that are wrong with Hollywood come up in that process. So we're excited for more on this as it becomes available. There's a new website with some basic information at 8sidedfilms.com. That's going to be updated in the very near future as well. There's a lot going on. Stuff is happening with quantum theory that is top secret for the time being, but exciting. And I think it's going to be a huge year. So stay tuned. Give us a subscribe if this is new to you. Thank you for watching. We'll catch you next week. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.